Family members said Jewish settlers entered the community attempting to seize sheep. Israeli soldiers followed. Not long after, Yusuf was dead. While the Israeli military said they responded to reports of Palestinians taking settlers' livestock and were investigating the incident. 60-year-old Ismail Awais is from the village.
Our lives have become a living hell, and unfortunately we've come to be treated as spoils of war. Settlers can now enter any house or farm and confiscate everything inside, as if we are the spoils of war. What's even more infuriating is that the army now protects these settlers when they attack our residential areas and farms.
After more than 2 years of war in the region, conditions in the West Bank have deteriorated significantly. The Israeli government's support for settler expansion, along with settler attacks, a beleaguered economy and an ever-growing network of Israeli military checkpoints are compounding the suffering of Palestinians there. The deaths of 2 teenage boys in Al-Lub and Sharqiya are the latest signs of this impossible situation.
US media reports say Havana. Our Cuba correspondent Will Branch reports.
The meeting in Havana between the director of the CIA and top Cuban government officials represents a significant development in US-Cuban relations. It comes amid reports the US Department of Justice is preparing to indict the 94-year-old Cuban revolutionary leader, Raul Castro. The exact content of the talks, which included Cuba's interior minister, the head of its intelligence agency, and Raul Castro's own grandson, isn't clear. But the Cuban government said they were designed to contribute to the political dialogue between both nations. No deal or agreement has been announced. Separately, the apparent decision by the Justice Department to indict Raul Castro is in relation to a long-standing call from conservative Cuban Americans for the former leader to face charges in relation to the shooting down of 2 civilian aircraft by Cuban military fighter jets in 1996. Analysts say an attempt by Washington to arrest Mr. Castro for any such indictment would be likely to meet huge opposition in Cuba, particularly among government loyalists.
A teenager who killed an 86-year-old woman after hitting her while riding an illegal electric motorbike has been jailed for more than 6 years at Newcastle Crown Court. Billy Stokoe drove into Gloria Stevenson as she crossed the road in Sunderland in May last year. Madeleine Flack reports.
Billy Stokoe, who was 18 at the time of the crash, cried in the dock as he was sentenced. The court was told he had cannabis in his system and was using his mobile phone when he hit Mrs. Stevenson at a zebra crossing. He did not stop at the scene and instead rode to a friend's house to change his clothes and hide the bike before handing himself in at a police station. He admitted causing death by dangerous driving. After the case, Superintendent Billy Mulligan from Northumbria Police said they were taking steps to educate people on the dangers of using illegal e-bikes.
Those bikes and those scooters, they're not fit for purpose. Yes, you can buy them in shops on the high street. They're not to be used on the road. By doing so, you're putting a huge amount of risk on your loved ones who you are buying this equipment for. It's a huge area that's developing, so there is this antisocial behaviour aspect of it. But on the other side of the coin, there's kids getting bought these bikes by their parents. They're inheriting this risk.
Mrs. Stevenson's family said they were devastated at her death and angry at the sentence given. They said that although their mother was 86, she still had a zest for life and died on one of her daily walks trying to clock up 10,000 steps a day.
Police have charged a US social media influencer with assault after an alleged racist incident at Bond Street Underground Station in London last October. Melissa Rain Lively is facing 1 count of assault by beating. Her partner, Philipp Ostermann, who's a German national, has been charged with 2 racially aggravated public order offences and a further public order offence. A man has admitted cutting down a Christmas tree which had stood for 10 years in the village of Shotton Colliery in County Durham. Dylan McNamara, who's 26, pleaded guilty to criminal damage and will be sentenced next month. The court heard the tree had been planted in memory of locals who'd served in the First World War. Now for a look at the morning papers, and supporters of Andy Burnham have told The Guardian that the Greater Manchester Mayor will push to become Labour's leader by the autumn, so he can address its September conference as Prime Minister. The paper reports that allies of Mr Burnham believe he can win a leadership election before the summer recess. However, sources close to the Mayor suggest he favours a longer timeline. Meanwhile, the Daily Telegraph claims loyalists who support the Prime Minister believe Sir Keir Starmer could resign if Mr Burnham wins the Makerfield by-election and is the only leadership challenger. The paper says Sir Keir is much less defiant in private than in public, but fears standing down now could trigger a free-for-all, which would result in chaos. The I paper suggests Mr Burnham would downplay his support for closer European integration if he became Prime Minister to avoid alienating Reform UK voters. The Mirror is one of several papers to report that Sir David Beckham is Britain's first billionaire sportsman after he and his wife Lady Victoria doubled their fortune in the last year. Dosh and Bex is the headline in The Star. The head coach of Hearts, Derek McInnes, has described his team's title showdown with Celtic later today as pure box office. Either side could be crowned Scottish Premiership champions on the final day of the season, with Hearts needing to avoid defeat away at Celtic to become the first non-Old Firm club to lift the title in 4 decades. Derek McInnes told a news conference it was the perfect ending to the season, and his players would travel to Celtic Park with courage and belief.
There might be people who think, everything's back on script and Celtic win their home game, win the league, and that's what Celtic have done for the last wee while. They've been the team that win more titles, but we've ripped the script up so often this season, and we've got one more in us, I think, and it's up to us to try and make that happen.
A 19-year-old man has been charged with a data protection offence tonight after the personal details of the referee from Celtic's match against Motherwell on Wednesday were leaked online. A controversial VAR penalty was awarded at the end of the game, allowing Celtic to cut the gap on Hearts to 1 point. The referee and his family have been placed under police protection. A muntjac deer has been rescued from a Marks and Spencer in Norwich after it got trapped next to the glass barrier of an escalator. Staff at the store on Rampant Horse Street called a local charity to rescue the deer, which has been named Lucy. Steph Leary from the Hillside Animal Sanctuary says Lucy is now recovering well, with only a few minor injuries.
We're not sure why it went into the store, but it sort of ran in and obviously got itself stuck in between the casing of the escalator, ended up upside down, and the staff were great, done everything they could, shut the store, put a blanket over the little deer to keep it calm, and gave us a call.
An Egyptian man has become a surprise social media star after he came up with an ingenious idea to escape Cairo's chock-a-block traffic. The tuk-tuk driver, known as Abdu, converted his three-wheeler into an underwater vehicle to sail across the River Nile. He wrapped it with several layers of thick plastic sheeting and fitted it with a snorkel. Abdu was cheered by onlookers as he took his modified vehicle down a ramp into the Nile. But the river police failed to see the funny side and arrested him for not having a proper licence. The headlines again. Labour's ruling body has said Andy Burnham can put himself forward as a candidate in the Makerfield by-election, placing him a step closer to challenging Sir Keir Starmer's leadership. The UK and other members of the European Convention on Human Rights have urged courts to rethink the way they decide migration cases and make it easier to order deportations. British Gas has agreed to pay millions of pounds to settle an investigation by the energy regulator into the forced fitting of prepayment meters. A college student from Oxfordshire has died in an outbreak of meningitis B. A teenager who knocked down and killed an 86-year-old woman while riding an illegal electric bike in Sunderland has been jailed. BBC News.
Presented by Chris Aldridge. And now for a look at the weather. Here's Chris Fawkes.
Hello. Friday's weather was a little bit better. OK, there were still a few showers around, but they weren't as heavy, they weren't as widespread, so many areas will have had dry weather. And although it was chilly again for most of the UK, with temperatures between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius, we did see highs hit 17 in Cardiff, which was the warmest spot in the UK. We've got more cool weather to come this weekend with rain at times, same actually into the early part of next week. But as we head through the week, it is going to get a lot warmer. And come Friday next week, temperatures could be heading into the upper 20s in the warmest spots. So we're going to put behind us this lengthy spell of cool weather and something a lot warmer on the way for some. Now, at the moment, overnight, we've got clear skies for the bulk of the UK. So just turning chilly, temperatures widely between 2 and 5 Celsius. Could be some patches of frost, though, for Scotland and the far north of England, where the lowest temperatures in rural areas get down to about -3 Celsius. It will cloud over in Northern Ireland, and by the end of the night a bit of light patchy rain will move in here as the weather front pushes in. And heading into Saturday, well, for Scotland, for England, perhaps eastern Wales too, should be a bright start to the day. Chilly, yes, but there should be plenty of early morning sunshine. However, for Northern Ireland, West Wales, parts of southwest England, it's already going to be clouding over with outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle. And through the day, this weather front is very gradually going to push its way eastward. So later in the afternoon, we'll probably see a few patches of light rain start to turn up across northwest England, southwest Scotland. But it'll probably stay dry for eastern England and the bulk of Scotland as well, with the best of any bright weather and sunshine hanging on across the northeast of Scotland, northeast England too. It is going to be another cool day for the time of year. Temperatures around 11 to 16 degrees. Sunday's forecast: rain to start off today across northern Scotland, bright for southern Scotland, England and Wales. Northern Ireland sees rain, and that rain is going to spread eastwards again, so turning wetter through the day for Wales, western England and across much of Scotland too. Another cool day, more rain early next week, but turning very warm for some of us by the end of the week. That's the latest forecast.
Thanks, Chris. Historian Katja Hoyer's Weimar Life on the Edge of Catastrophe follows the story of the residents of Weimar during the rise and reign of Hitler. It's read by Sean Thomas.
At the end of 1926, Karl and Marie Weyrich had scraped and borrowed all they could to put down a deposit on their home. They took out a mortgage to cover the rest. Despite its daunting cost, by mid-1927 they were recovering financially. Karl had secured a position within the Thuringian State Association of Bookbinders and Paper Merchants. It was his job to organize the distribution of printing paper to the bookbinders and to store school books until they were sold on by paper merchants. Another perk of his new role was that it allowed him to travel. When the State Association held a conference in southern Thuringia, he was flown in from Weimar. "My first ever aeroplane flight," he noted with real awe. Air travel was still a futuristic novelty. At the conference, he was invited to Bayreuth for the Wagner Festival and received his ticket from Winifred Wagner. Richard Wagner's daughter-in-law was now a fully paid-up member of the Nazi Party. The Nazis relied on fervent supporters like Winifred to carry the movement through the so-called golden years of the Weimar Republic. The young democracy was by no means out of the woods, but most Germans had lost their appetite for extreme politics. Hitler used those meagre years to grow a solid party base. But Hitler's early followers were fanatics. Baldur von Schirach was one of them. He enrolled at Munich University, declaring he wanted to be near Hitler. He knew he could target a new group for the Nazis, university students who preferred their old conservative fraternities. Schirach believed Hitler's charisma would win them over. Sheer luck provided him with the opportunity to talk to Hitler when he spotted him walking his German shepherd dog. Hitler recognized the young man from Weimar and invited him back to his small rented room. They drank tea as Schirach explained how the Nazi student movement needed a speech from Hitler. Hitler was skeptical. He believed that a largely upper-class audience like Schirach's fellow students wouldn't be susceptible to the trance-like state he induced in beer halls. He didn't want to face a half-empty venue. Schirach offered Hitler a deal. He'd book the Hofbräuhaus beer hall and ensure a room full of students. The evening of the 21st of November was a complete success for Schirach. The room was so packed out that students sat on the tiled stoves, he recalled. Hitler had clearly underestimated how much political anger there was among the student body. Their parents had lost status in recent years, leaving many students fearing for their own future. Many were also deeply anti-Semitic, and universities were where he would gain some of his most fervent supporters. Hitler was deeply impressed by Schirach. He appointed him Reichsführer of the National Socialist German Students' League in July 1928. Baldur was just where he wanted to be, by Hitler's side. A delegation of Thuringian Nazis arrived in Munich. Fritz Sauckel and Hans Ziegler presented their grievances to Hitler about their boss, Gauleiter Arthur Dinter. Dinter was a religious zealot whose erratic leadership had caused permanent rifts within the Thuringian chapter of the Nazi Party. Dinter shared the Nazis' racism, but for him the movement was about the religious redemption of the German people. This challenged the Führer's authority over the ideological direction of Nazism. Hitler gave way to Sauckel and Ziegler, dismissing Dinter as Gauleiter and appointing them as Gauleiter and deputy, respectively. The path was clear for Sauckel to take over the Thuringian Nazi Party. Despite the relative recovery of the economy, many sensed that the veneer of stability was paper-thin. Culture in the Weimar Republic fed on impermanence, trauma, and uncertainty. The result was a dizzying kind of hedonism. The urban middle classes danced, filmed, painted as they got swept away by an intense tide of creativity. Berlin, in particular, became a hotbed of experimentation. To the conservative elites in Weimar, the new culture seemed detached, foreign, and subversive. The Nazis saw political potential in the widespread moral panic. Hitler charged his ideologue, Alfred Rosenberg, with the formation of a folkish and anti-Semitic National Socialist Society for German Culture. By December, the new organization had been renamed Kampfbund für Deutsche Kultur, the Militant League for German Culture. The KFDK took it upon itself to educate the German people about the links between race, art, and science. The Nazis had realized they would never reach everyone through mass rallies. The all-important conservative elites had to be wooed in other ways. Adolf Bartels co-founded a Weimar branch which drew powerful support from the Nietzsche archive. Goethe was also to play a key role in a supposed rediscovery and defense of German Kultur. In his lifetime, the poet was a complex man with Jewish friends who nonetheless believed in some of the contemporary stereotypes. There was enough ambiguity there to remodel the legacy of the country's national poet into a new German Goethe. Muted cheers rang through the Volkhaus in the early morning hours of Monday, the 21st of May, 1928, where parties anxiously awaited the results of the German federal election. Nearly half of the state had voted for left-wing politics, enough for one local paper to declare "Lurch to the left, red Thuringia" on its front page. The Nazis had made no electoral headway, despite a rise in party membership. It was a huge disappointment for their supporters and activists, given the enthusiastic reception they received wherever they went. What happened in Thuringia more or less reflected the picture across Germany. The splintering of the middle-class vote was a reflection of the fact that many in that income bracket were beginning to feel politically homeless, as the parties they'd previously voted for were hopelessly divided. Disaffection found no vent because the economy was at its most stable since the pre-war era. Karl Weyrich didn't even mention the elections in his diary, instead noting theatre visits, work trips, and even a bratwurst sausage he was particularly impressed with. At 76%, the turnout of the federal elections was at the lowest in the young Weimar Republic's history. The town of Weimar itself reflected this listlessness. But in their support for one party, Weimar had stood out. 4 times as many as their fellow Germans overall had voted for the Nazi Party. The building of a modern sports park in Weimar was proof of the fact that it had ambitions beyond the usual tourism and conference traffic. This suited Rosa and Arthur Schmidt just fine. The Hotel Hohenzollern had cultivated a reputation as a meeting place for sports committees. The Schmidts ensured that they were involved in the preparations for the grand opening of the new Weimarer Stadion, scheduled for the 28th of October. The English game had experienced a boom in Germany after the First World War, and Weimar wanted to open the stadium with an unforgettable football spectacle. All went to plan. Weimar muscled in on the increasingly lucrative market of spectator sports. From 1928 onwards, competitions such as the German swimming championships were held in its cutting-edge facilities. Rosa and Arthur Schmidt were right at the heart of developments. On the 17th of December, the Hotel Hohenzollern became an officially registered business, with an annual value of 11,000 Reichsmark. Political malaise notwithstanding, 1928 was a year of optimism for Weimar. But the election had produced a fractured federal parliament, and President Hindenburg had turned 80 the previous year. The search for a successor gathered pace. Who might be suitable? In mid-November, Admiral Reinhard Scheer was summoned from his home in Weimar to see Reich President Hindenburg. Scheer was now a 65-year-old retiree, mostly concerned with writing books and cultivating the memory of his leadership of the fleet at the Battle of Jutland. But the victor of Skagerrak also campaigned relentlessly to rebuild the German navy, which had been severely limited by the Treaty of Versailles. He seemed the Conservatives' best bet to replace Hindenburg. There was only one problem. Days after he'd visited Hindenburg, Reinhard Scheer suffered a stroke and died unexpectedly. German Conservatives clung on to the frail Hindenburg in their efforts to undermine the republic that they so despised. But they knew they were playing for time. Soon the old man would retire or die. They would have to keep their eyes open for a younger man to lead Germany out of chaos and decline. All over Thuringia, people studied maps in the morning of the 12th of September 1929. Would the famous airship Graf Zeppelin come this way today? Many Weimarers flocked out in the afternoon hoping to catch a glimpse. LZ-127 Graf Zeppelin had just completed the first circumnavigation of the world by airship and was a source of pride and hope to many Germans. According to the Treaty of Versailles, Germany wasn't allowed to have an air force. But rules had been relaxed in 1925, and Ugo Eckner, the chairman of the Luftschiffbau Zeppelin Company, had taken advantage. He not only built Graf Zeppelin, but also managed to get many powerful people from former enemy nations on board. The journey took 21 days and was a sensation. Eckner was even received by US President Herbert Hoover. Germany was beginning to gain self-confidence. At 3 o'clock, the long, silver shape of the Graf Zeppelin appeared in the sky over Weimar. The roar of its 5 Maybach combustion engines was amplified by bells ringing all over the town. Karl Weyrich was as awed as his fellow citizens. What a time to be alive! But 3 weeks later, on the 3rd of October, Gustav Stresemann, Germany's foreign minister, died suddenly. Stresemann had overseen not just the recovery from hyperinflation in 1924, but had since fought tooth and nail to give Germany a good name again. The situation was so fragile. Germany relied heavily on American loans to steer its economy through the choppy waters of reparations and post-war crisis. It needed someone like Stresemann, who was both a proud nationalist and a persuasive diplomat, to walk the tightrope of domestic and international tensions. Another 3 weeks later, a small notice appeared in a Thuringian newspaper with the headline, "Black Day in Wall Street." It informed readers that Thursday, the 24th of October, had been a great day of struggle at the stock market in New York. At first, the Wall Street crash seemed sideline news. By December, it was beginning to affect the German economy. As American investment was withdrawn from Germany and confidence in recovery crumbled, companies hired fewer workers and the downward spiral gathered speed. Unemployment was heading towards 10%, higher than at any other time in living memory. The brief illusion of economic recovery was going up in smoke.
Weimar, Life on the Edge of Catastrophe was written by Katja Hoyer and read by Sean Thomas. It was abridged by Julian Wilkinson and produced by Lou Kemp. It's a BBC Scotland audio production for Radio 4. Good morning, and now the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office on behalf of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency at 0015 on Saturday the 16th of May. The general synopsis at 1800. Low south at Sierra 995 losing its identity by 1800 Saturday. The area forecast for the next 24 hours. Viking north at Sierra, south at Sierra. Northerly 4 to 6 at first in West Viking, otherwise variable 2 to 4. Showers, good. 40s Cromarty 4th. Northwest 4 to 6, backing south or southwest 3 to 5 later. Rain or showers, good. Occasionally moderate. Tyne, Dogger. Northwest 4 to 6, backing south or southwest 3 to 5. Rain or showers, good. Occasionally moderate. Fisher. Cyclonic, becoming west 3 to 5. Showers, good. German Bight. West 5 to 7, backing southwest 3 to 5 later. Showers, good. Humber, Thames. Northwest backing west or southwest 3 to 5, occasionally 6 at first in Humber. Showers, rain later, good. Occasionally moderate. Dover. Variable 2 to 4, becoming southwest 3 to 5. Showers, rain later, good. Occasionally moderate. White, Portland, Plymouth. Northwest, backing west or southwest 3 to 5, occasionally 6 later. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Biscay, west or northwest 3 to 5, showers, good. Trafalgar, north 4 to 6, showers, good. Fitzroy, Seoul, north or northwest 4 or 5, occasionally 6 at first. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Lundy, Fastnet, west or northwest 3 to 5, increasing 6 for a time. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Irish Sea, northwest 3 or 4, backing south or southwest, then veering west later 3 to 5, occasionally 6 later. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Shannon, west or northwest 4 to 6, rain then showers, good, occasionally moderate. Rockall, southeast 3 to 5, veering west 4 to 6, rain or showers, good, occasionally poor. Malin, variable 2 to 4, becoming southeast 3 to 5, then veering west 4 to 6 later, rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Hebrides, Variable 2 to 4, becoming southeast, then cyclonic later, 3 to 5. Occasional rain, good, occasionally moderate. Bailey, southeast, becoming cyclonic, 4 to 6. Rain, good, occasionally poor. Fair Isle, north or northwest, 4 to 6, becoming variable 2 to 4 later. Rain or showers, moderate or good. Faroes, north or northeast, 3 to 5. Showers, good. And southeast Iceland, southeast backing east, 4 to 6. Showers, good. Weather reports from coastal stations for 2300. Tyree automatic. North 2, recent rain. 16 miles, 1008, falling slowly. Stornoway. Northwest by west 1, 35 miles, 1008, falling slowly. Lerwick. North, northwest 5, recent drizzle. 5 miles, 1002, now falling. Wick. Northwest 3, recent drizzle. 11 miles, now falling. Aberdeen. Northwest 4, slight drizzle. 22 miles, 1005, steady. Lucas. North 1, 30 miles, 1006, rising slowly. Boomer. West by north 2, 19 miles, 1006, rising slowly. Bridlington. West southwest 2, 1006, falling slowly. Sandetti light vessel automatic, east 3, 11 miles, 1008. Greenwich light vessel automatic, west 4, 11 miles, 1007. St Catherine's Point automatic, north, northwest 3, 1008, now falling. Jersey. Northwest 3, 15 miles, 1010, rising slowly. Scilly automatic, west 3, 14 miles, 1013, falling slowly. Milford Haven. Northwest 1, 27 miles, 1010, falling slowly. Aberporth. Southwest 2, 35 miles, 1010, falling slowly. Valley. West southwest 3, 22 miles, 1009, falling slowly. Liverpool Crosby. West northwest 4, 8 miles, 1008, now falling. Valencia. West northwest 2, 22 miles, 1012, falling slowly. Ronaldsway. Northwest by north 2, 16 miles, 1008, now falling. Malin Northwest by north 2, 24 miles, 1009, falling slowly. Here is the weather forecast for the inshore waters of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, valid for the following 24 hours, issued by the Met Office at 2300 on Friday, the 15th of May. General situation. The United Kingdom currently lies in a showery northwesterly airflow. However, winds will weaken and back generally westerly as an Atlantic frontal system moves eastwards through Saturday. This will bring outbreaks of rain, followed by further rain or showers on Sunday. Cape Wrath to Rattray Head, including Orkney. Northwesterly 4 or 5, occasionally 6 at first in east, becoming variable 2 to 4. Showers, good. Rattray Head to Berwick upon Tweed. Northwest 3 to 5, occasionally 6 at first near Rattray Head, becoming variable 2 to 4, becoming south or southwest 3 to 5 later. Showers at first in north and later in south, good. Berwick upon Tweed to Whitby. West or northwest 3 to 5, becoming variable 2 to 4, then becoming south or southwest 3 to 5 later. Occasional rain later, good. Occasionally moderate later. Whitby to Gibraltar Point. West becoming variable, then south or southwest later 2 to 4. Showers, rain later, good. Occasionally moderate. Gibraltar Point to North Foreland. Variable 2 to 4, becoming westerly or northwesterly, then becoming southwesterly later 3 to 5. Showers, rain later, good. Occasionally moderate. North Foreland to Southsea Bill. Variable, becoming westerly or southwesterly 2 to 4, increasing 5 at times later. Showers, rain later, good, occasionally moderate. Selsey-Bill to Lyme Regis, northwest 3 or 4, backing west or southwest 3 to 5. Rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Lyme Regis to Land's End, including the Isles of Scilly, west or northwest, backing southwest for a time 3 or 4, increasing 5 at times later. Occasional rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Land's End to St David's Head, including the Bristol Channel, west or northwest, becoming variable 2 to 4, then becoming northwest 4 to 6 later. Occasional rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor later. St David's Head to Great Orme Head, including St George's Channel, west 2 or 3, backing southwest 3 or 4, then veering west 4 to 6 later. Occasional rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Great Orme Head to the Mull of Galloway, northwest backing south or southwest 2 to 4, then veering west 4 or 5 later. Showers, rain later, good, occasionally poor later. Isle of Man, west or northwest backing south or southwest 2 to 4, veering west 4 or 5 later. Fair, rain or drizzle later, good, occasionally moderate or poor later. Loch Foyle to Carlingford Loch, northwest 3 or 4, becoming variable 3 or less, then southeast 3 or 4 later, then veering west 4 or 5 later. Rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Mull of Galloway to Mull of Kintyre, including the Firth of Clyde and North Channel, northwesterly 3 or 4, becoming variable 3 or less, then becoming southerly 3 or 4 later, then veering westerly 4 or 5 later. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Mull of Kintyre to Ardnamurcombe Point, north or northwest 3 or 4, becoming variable 3 or less, then becoming south later, then veering west later 3 to 5. Rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Ardnamurcombe Point to Cape Wrath, north 3 or 4, becoming variable 3 or less, occasionally 4 later. Rain or showers, moderate or good, occasionally poor. And Shetland Isles, north or northwest 5 or 6, decreasing 2 to 4, then becoming variable later. Rain at times, moderate or good. And that completes the shipping bulletin. And that brings us to the end of our day's broadcasting here on BBC Radio 4. In a moment, we'll be joining the BBC World Service, who will take us through the night before we return at 5:30, when my colleague, Fiji Alice, will have the news. Thank you for your company this evening. This is Joanna Keane in Broadcasting House in London, wishing you, wherever you are, a safe and a peaceful night. Good night.
This is the newsroom from the BBC World Service with Will Chalk. Coming up, Israel says it's killed one of the Hamas architects behind the October 7th attacks, leaving people in Gaza asking,
where is the ceasefire? We are dying every day. For the sake of Allah, stop the war.
Donald Trump is back in Washington after a 2-day summit in China, but what's actually been achieved? We'll have the latest on an Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. And the hunt for the next James Bond has begun.
I don't think they have to be British. It could be anyone who could portray those sensibilities. Bond is our last sort of contemporary worldwide cultural hero.
So who's in the running? We will take a look after the news.
BBC News with Chris Barrow. Israel says it carried out airstrikes in Gaza targeting the head of the armed wing of Hamas, describing him as one of the architects of the October the 7th attacks nearly 3 years ago. It's not been confirmed whether Izzeddin al-Haddad has been killed. The emergency services in Gaza City say the Israeli strikes killed at least 7 people and left dozens of others injured. This Gaza resident was at the scene of the incident.
The building was full of children and women. There were displaced people. Children are burning alive and women are burning. Whoever says the war on Gaza is over is lying. Every day there are martyrs and injured people. Children die every day. People die every day.
Lebanon has accused Israel of deliberately targeting medical facilities, even as the two countries agreed to extend a nominal ceasefire for another 45 days. The Health Ministry said Israel struck an emergency response centre in the south near Nabatea, killing 6 people, including 3 paramedics, and had destroyed a primary health care in Tyre, damaging a nearby hospital. Boeing has confirmed that China has agreed to buy 200 aircraft in a deal announced by Donald Trump during his trip to Beijing. The company's chief executive, Kelly Ortberg, said he expected further orders from China in the future. Shares in Boeing fell after the president's initial announcement, with some investors expecting a larger purchase. The Bolivian government says it struck a deal with protesting miners who've been demanding the resignation of President Rodrigo Paz. The economy minister, Jose Gabriel Espinosa, said the agreement came after almost 12 hours of talks. Here's Anbara Sunitarajan.
The Andean nation has been in turmoil since early May, with protests escalating against the austerity policies of the center-right president who came to power in November with a promise to end the country's worst economic crisis in 4 decades. His decision to scrap long-standing fuel subsidies to preserve foreign currency reserves has raised living costs for Bolivians. School teachers, transportation workers, indigenous people and miners have joined the demonstrations.
It's been confirmed that the highly infectious disease Ebola has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Uganda's health ministry also confirmed that a patient had died of the virus on Thursday. Here's our Africa correspondent, Thomas Mkwana.
Vaccines exist, but the interesting thing with this outbreak is that according to one of the virologists who co-discovered Ebola, this strain of Ebola is alarming because he says it's not the usual Ebola virus that is detected, the one which vaccines have been developed against. And according to the Center for Disease Control of Africa, this latest outbreak has a different one, which means that the vaccines that are available, the medication that is available to treat the symptoms, might be ineffective against it.
World News from the BBC. The governor of the U.S. state of Colorado, a Democrat, has almost halved the prison sentence of a former Republican county clerk convicted of tampering with election equipment during the 2020 presidential elections. 71-year-old Tina Peters, a former clerk in Mesa County in western Colorado, have been found guilty of allowing an unauthorized outsider to access the county's voting equipment and copy it. The World Health Organization is calling for countries to do more to restrict the sale of nicotine pouches to young people. It says the pouches, which users place next to their gums, are being aggressively marketed to teenagers, creating the risk of a new generation of nicotine addicts. Dr. Vinyak Prasad is the head of the WHO's Tobacco-Free Initiative.
Our report documents how nicotine pouch manufacturers are aggressively marketing these products to young people. These tactics include sleek and discreet packaging, candy-like flavors such as bubble gum and gummy bears, influencer marketing, social media campaigns, sponsorship of concerts and Formula One events, and aspirational lifestyle branding.
Armed men are reported to have attacked a primary and a secondary school in northeastern Nigeria, abducting several children. One resident of the village of Musa in Borno State told the BBC that his daughter was among those kidnapped. He said more than 40 children, some as young as 3, had been taken. The police say many children remain unaccounted for, but some may have fled into nearby bushland. A judge in New York has declared a mistrial in a rape case against the disgraced film producer Harvey Weinstein after the jury said it was unable to reach a verdict. Jessica Mann is one of dozens of women who accused him of sexual misconduct. She says he raped her in a hotel room more than a decade ago. It's the third time a New York jury has considered the case. Weinstein remains in jail on other convictions. He denies wrongdoing. And that's the latest world news from the BBC.
Welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Will Chalk. Well, there is officially a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but what practically that means is less clear. Israel says it's targeted the leader of Hamas's military wing in Gaza. A government statement didn't explicitly claim Izzadin al-Haddad had been killed, but according to a senior Israeli security official, initial indications suggested he had been. Hamas hasn't commented on the health of the commander, but the Palestinian civil defense spokesperson, Mahmoud Basal, said the attack in Gaza City had killed civilians.
The Israeli occupation targeted a building inhabited by citizens, a residential building in the Ramal neighborhood, Al-Mutaz building, with 3 war missiles that caused partial destruction. There's a big number of missing, victims and wounded due to this targeting. We're talking about hundreds of citizens who are living inside this building. The missile was fired without any warning or notification.
According to eyewitnesses and local sources, the building was struck by 3 missiles, launched simultaneously from 2 separate directions, before a fleeing car was hit nearby. Abu Youssef was there.
We were staying in a residential area with women and children. The place was hit by a belt of fire. It's very terrifying. And now they've hit the car. Where is the ceasefire? We are dying every day. For the sake of Allah, stop the war.
Over the course of the war, Israel has assassinated several Hamas leaders. So who is Izzadin al-Haddad, and what would his death mean, if confirmed, for both sides? Israel doesn't allow the BBC to report freely from Gaza. Our reporter Emir Nada is in Jerusalem.
Izzadin al-Haddad was a mastermind of October the 7th, the last living mastermind still in Gaza, still alive, who hasn't been assassinated by Israel. As of last year, he's taken over the leadership of Hamas after all the other leaders have been killed, and he's also quite well known. He gave a prominent interview to Al Jazeera last year during the war in which he talked about Hamas's strategies. And so after these strikes tonight, in which we still don't know if they have indeed been successful or not, the Israeli military has accused him, al-Haddad, of the responsibility for the murder, kidnap and injury of Israeli citizens and troops on October the 7th, but also of violating the current ceasefire by working to rebuild Hamas's capabilities. Now, obviously, we must mention that Hamas and indeed some humanitarian organizations also are saying that Israel isn't upholding their end of the ceasefire agreement too. But this is a significant blow to Hamas's leadership and may indeed impact their ability to strategize and negotiate going forward.
In a separate development but related to this, Israel and Lebanon have agreed to extend their ceasefire after talks in Washington. But it's another truce that has been so far shaky at best, and cross-border strikes are continuing. Here's Emir Nada again.
This ceasefire has been in place for around a month. We're extending it now for another 45 days. The State Department is talking about that period will be used to make further progress. But actually we've had very little detail, and indeed many people have been looking at these negotiations to see if there would be detail about how and when Israeli troops might withdraw from Lebanon, how these big goals might be achieved, such as the disarmament of Hezbollah. These are big, complex issues, and indeed the current ceasefire that is in place is, well, very, very limited. It's reducing the violence. We've seen 55 people killed, Lebanese people killed in the past 48 hours, according to the health ministry there. There's widespread Israeli attacks in the south of the country. We've seen an IDF soldier killed by Hezbollah last night. So the fighting is still ongoing, and what we're waiting to see now is there any more detail about how the United States will guarantee a real peace and a real ceasefire unfolding and being implemented in Lebanon, which might achieve some of these more longer-term goals.
Emir Nada reporting from Jerusalem. After a 2-day summit with China's President Xi, that one of our correspondents described as heavier on optics than outcomes, President Trump is back in Washington.
That was a great success. It was fantastic, sir. We made great deals, we did great trade deals, we had great relationships, and a lot of things have happened and you'll be hearing about them. But that was a tremendous success. I think it really was a historic moment.
China's foreign ministry said merely that trade between the two countries would be expanded under the framework of reciprocal tariff reductions. One thing that has been confirmed, Boeing says China's agreed to buy 200 aircraft, but shares initially fell because investors were actually expecting more. Now, inevitably, Iran was on the agenda too. Our correspondent Tom Bateman travelled back to the US on board Air Force One as part of the White House pool of journalists. And while he was on board, he asked President Trump if China's relationship with Iran could help to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He filed this report during a refuelling stop in Alaska.
Here was a diplomatic opportunity to try and take advantage of the considerable leverage that President Xi has over the Iranians, to try to use that to get the Iranians to at least ease their grip or to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That, of course, playing directly into the cost of fuel in the US and into rising inflation again. So I put that question to Mr. Trump and asked whether he got any firm commitment from President Xi on that issue. Now, he said that he didn't because he didn't want to ask for a favor.
We don't need favors. We wiped out their armed forces, essentially.
He said if he asked for a favor, he would need to get a favor in return. Didn't want to do that, although he did suggest that it is also in President Xi's interest for the strait to be open, so that may happen, that pressure may happen. But no signs so far of any breakthrough on that as Mr. Trump heads back to Washington, and that big domestic issue, a big international issue, still not solved.
Tom Bateman there in Alaska. You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Will Chalk. We're in Bolivia for our next story, where since May people have been protesting against the austerity policies of the centre-right President Rodrigo Paz. On Thursday, it turned violent, with explosions and tear gas, as a group of miners called for him to resign. Mining unions have also been seeking changes to their work contracts. Now, though, the Bolivian government says it's struck a deal. Our global affairs correspondent, Ambarasan Ethirajan, told me more.
The Bolivian government says that after nearly 12 hours of negotiations, they had reached a deal with the miners who launched a big protest on Thursday. Now, a representative for the union is also saying that the government had addressed most of the demands, especially with regard to access to further equipment, and also they need more explosives basically for mining work. But both sides have not listed out all the demands or what had been agreed and what had not been agreed. So this is the situation as of now. But it came a day after a protest by the miners that turned violent with police and protesting miners. They were clashing in the main city, La Paz. But it is still not the end of the story for the Bolivian government, because it is still grappling with protests by other workers, for example, teachers and transportation workers. They have been demanding wage increases as well as better working conditions. So the political turmoil still continues in Bolivia.
And at the heart of this, like we see in so many countries, is the economy, because people think their lives are getting worse.
The current president, Rodrigo Paz, came to power in November. He assumed charge after 20 years of socialist rule. And at that time, the country was facing severe funding crisis, foreign exchange crisis. So he announced various measures, basically austerity and privatization. And he was talking about capitalism for all. He's a center-right president. But they did not go well with many Bolivians. And one of the decisions he took was to scrap the fuel subsidies. That put up the cost of the fuel, which resulted in other prices also going up. And so that is one of the reasons why many Bolivians are on the street asking for better wages. And some of the other policies like farming, how they can incorporate some of the small holdings into bigger businesses. That was again raising questions about the indigenous communities. They were worried about big businesses coming and taking over the land. So since early May, the protests have intensified. In fact, there is a blockade going on around the main city, La Paz, with many people talking about, there could be even food shortage if these blockades continue. So it's a big challenge for the government, but at the moment they have reached the deal with the miners. But with regard to other workers, they need to find a way out.
Ambarasan Ethirajan. Tensions between the US and Cuba are already high, and now there are reports America is planning to indict Raul Castro, the country's 94-year-old former president and the brother of the revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. US media is saying it's over the deaths of 4 people in 1996 when Cuba shot down planes operated by the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue. And this is after the head of the CIA held talks with Cuban officials in Havana on Thursday. Our Cuba correspondent Will Grant has this report.
The meeting in Havana between the director of the CIA and top Cuban government officials represents a significant development in US-Cuban relations. It comes amid reports the US Department of Justice is preparing to indict the 94-year-old Cuban revolutionary leader, Raul Castro. The exact content of the talks, which included Cuba's interior minister, the head of its intelligence agency, and Raul Castro's own grandson, isn't clear. But the Cuban government said they were designed to contribute to the political dialogue between both nations. No deal or agreement has been announced. Separately, the apparent decision by the Justice Department to indict Raul Castro is in relation to a long-standing call from conservative Cuban Americans for the former leader to face charges in relation to the shooting down of 2 civilian aircraft by Cuban military fighter jets in 1996. Analysts say an attempt by Washington to arrest Mr. Castro for any such indictment would be likely to meet huge opposition in Cuba, particularly among government loyalists.
Will Grant. Politicians in Australia's Northern Territory have announced a review into the child protection system after the death of a 5-year-old girl in Alice Springs. Kumanjai Little Baby, as she's now known for cultural reasons, went missing last month after being put to bed by her mother in an Aboriginal community. A 47-year-old man's been charged with her murder. Now, her death has caused national outrage and grief, but it's also highlighted the deep disparities that exist in Australia. Our Australia correspondent Katie Watson has this report from Alice Springs, and a warning for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island listeners. Our coverage does contain references to someone who has died.
She was my little princess. My princess who loved the colour pink. My heart is broken into a million pieces.
Kumanjai Little Baby, in the words of her mother, a little girl like any other. Hundreds of people turned up to this vigil, many of them wearing pink. There are people in jumpers that are pink because it's really chilly now with the sun going down here in the outback in winter. Dogs with pink bows, children with pink balloons, everyone paying respect to the little girl who died. Kumanjai Little Baby's body was found 5 days after she went missing. A man's been charged with her murder, but her death has made the country reflect. How could this have happened? A small child from a vulnerable poor family left exposed. Why? So many questions that need answering, but for now the community wants to grieve. A period known as sorry business. The raw pain echoed across the sports ground after the vigil ended.
I think more than anything it's probably the sadness of that with systems around poverty for marginalised people that people fall through the cracks, and this little girl was beloved by her family and community but obviously lived in poverty and was vulnerable.
It's often there's heavy things that happen in this town, and it's, as a non-Indigenous Australian, I think the colonisation story is still really big here, it's still really present.
A jewel set in Australia's northern seas.
For decades, Australian governments have introduced policies that have failed Aboriginal people.
It's inhabited by a people whose instincts are not far removed from the lower animals, and the children especially are just carefree products of nature in the raw.
Right up to the 1970s, thousands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were removed from their families to get them to assimilate, part of what's known as the stolen generations.
White missionaries have come among the coloured Aboriginals and are doing noble work in saving the blacks from themselves.
Then, in 2007, the Northern Territory intervention that lasted 15 years, an Australian federal government initiative aimed at combating alleged child sexual abuse in Aboriginal communities.
I don't want to be right here, right now, to have to stand in this chamber.
Kumanjai Little Baby's family has asked that her death not be politicised,
But politicians on all sides now want to make their point. Liberal Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who said she was a relative of the little girl, spoke earlier this week.
For too long in this country, there has been silence around what is happening in too many town camps and remote communities. A silence driven by fear. Fear of speaking honestly about dysfunction, violence, alcohol abuse. That silence is killing our babies.
Not everyone agrees. Catherine Liddle leads SNAKE, the peak body for Aboriginal organisations looking after children and their families.
Very often it's a country that has been very good at demonising us, and it's demonised us since colonisation. That's a really hard narrative to unpick, and when we look at things like child protection in Australia today, the child protection system was built to remove Aboriginal children from their families and has not moved from that.
This week, the Northern Territory government said a review would be launched into the child protection system here and reforms will be made. But leaders are clear. Aboriginal people need not to be blamed for these failings, and they also need to be consulted to find a way forward. But few here in Alice Springs that I spoke to really believe her death will deliver much needed change.
Katie Watson. Africa's top health agency has declared an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with more than 240 suspected cases and 65 deaths in the Ituri province. The outbreak has also spread to neighbouring Uganda. Our reporter Emery Makumenu sent this update earlier from Kinshasa.
We understand that authorities have started contact tracing in all these towns, in Mongwalo, in Bwampere, and also in Bunia, where Bunia is the capital city of the Ituri province, and they are suspecting some cases there as well, so they are all busy verifying. But what is important here is that the sequencing is what they are doing here in Kinshasa at the National Institute of Biomedical Research to find out which strain are we dealing with here. Is it the Zaire? Is it the other strains? The Africa CDC Director, Dr. Jean Kaseya, has already expressed a concern that they think this is not the Zaire strain, while we do have a vaccine that can be used for the Zaire and not for the other strains. Since 2021, the Congolese army is in operation in that particular province of Ituri, where you have dozens of armed groups, including the Islamic State affiliate, the Allied Democratic Forces. So there is a security concern in Ituri. The health system is also grappling with some funding issues.
Emery Makumeno. Next, you get to wear a smart tuxedo, cause huge explosions by pressing a button on your watch, and drink endless vodka martinis. Shaken, not stirred. Let's be honest, playing James Bond wouldn't be a bad job. And now with Amazon MGM Studios controlling the franchise, the hunt for the next one has officially kicked off. The speculation started long ago, with names like Jacob Elordi, Callum Turner and Aaron Taylor-Johnson all in the frame. As for who will accept the mission, AJ Chowdhury is from the James Bond International Fan Club.
I believe Amazon are trying to go slightly younger and kind of get a new youth audience. They're big shoes to fill. Daniel Craig was the most commercially successful and critically successful James Bond we've had. So it's a bunch of people who I think have the Goldilocks amount of fame. They've done a lot of stage work, a lot of film and television on both sides of the Atlantic, but haven't quite made it. They're not too famous, not too unknown. They're just right, the Goldilocks amount. I'd hazard to guess that British actors, one of the key people who's been cited is Harris Dickinson, who's made a name for himself in good quality drama. He also played a spy in Kingsman. Another person cited by the trade paper Variety is Lewis Partridge, who appeared in Stephen Knight's House of Guinness. I don't think they have to be British. It could be anyone who could portray those sensibilities. Bond is our last sort of contemporary worldwide cultural hero. In this country, it's a cultural element. Around the world, it's sort of a lightning rod for, you know, what people expect from a British hero. So I think they have to portray it as someone that could be conceivably British. Bond is a brand that's been built nearly 70 years. It's an unqualified success. And with a brand like that, you don't turn a Coke can blue.
AJ Chowdhury getting very excited about James Bond there.